High streets are really important to us as well. Over half of high streets are built before 1916, so they're very often the kind of most immediate way of accessing the historic environment and really being in touch with the past. So they really matter to historic England too. And one of the things we've been doing is a high street cultural programme across the country, and in Bristol we partnered with Bristol City Council and the Bristol Photography Festival to run some cultural activity over 9 high streets, including Shirehampton. And I really loved what happened in Shirehampton. Chris Hoare, who's a Bristol photographer himself, he worked with the Shirehampton Men's Social Club there. He found a portrait of social club members from 1954, and he was inspired to kind of create a new set of portraits of the people that use the club now. And the other commission as part of that was with a photographer called Clementine Schneiderman, and she worked with a women's group, the Shire Stitchers, who are mainly retired but have really long connections to Shirehampton and really great memory, and she took portraits of them in the public hall which they use as their venue. And I really loved the 2 photographers bringing together the men's social club and this women's stitching group, because I think it really speaks to the hidden lives of high streets that happen all over the city, and Shirehampton is no exception to that.
And what did people feel about that? I mean, the Working Men's Club, for example, would have traditionally been probably really busy when there were loads of dockers working on the docks in Avonmouth. And lots of my family basically were dockers for generations and would have been in and out of that place. Ruby Jean's is a very new kind of coffee shop in an old bank that used to be the NatWest and is now closed. How did people experience that kind of transition from traditional uses of the high street to more modern uses of it?
Yeah, I think everybody's really happy that there's activity happening there. You know, we've all seen high streets that feel really unloved and abandoned, so I think people really welcome the new in that sense, as long as it's focusing on community and connection. I always kind of think of what people want from high streets as 3 C's, so they really want community and connection, and that's important to tackle all sorts of issues like loneliness and isolation, but also just to kind of feel part of where you live. They also really look for culture, so a lot of the people that take part in our cultural programmes are really telling us that they expect culture and experience in their high streets now. So people are reimagining the way high streets could be in the future. But the third one is character. They're really looking for the character, the identity of a place, and I think that's why so many people are looking for independent shops and for something different that you can't get on another high street. They really want their local place to speak to them and speak to its character. So I think, yes, there is of course always a nostalgia and an appreciation for the past, but really what people want is liveliness and belonging together, and I think high streets are brilliant places where that can play out for people. And
we're missing that quite a bit, aren't we, really, with new development? So there's a lot of frustration that people have, certainly for the smaller developments. I think the bigger ones where there are lots of houses being built, they often think about these things, we hope, but the smaller ones, no one really seems to pick it up. And so do people that live in newer communities, they presumably feel like they're missing out on something because they don't have that centre or that high street focus?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned about from the way that we used to build places. So, you know, we say as a sort of sector jargony term, place shaping, but there is a lot to be learned from the way that older places grew and developed, and I think there's such an important element which is not just residential or not just business, but places for people to come together, to convene, to connect, to have community. And I think if you don't have that element in a development, it can feel quite sterile and it can really isolate people.
Some of the things that have come up for us as well in our village conversations has been about accessibility in the high streets. So a couple of years ago, for example, I did a kind of tour of a high street with a couple of constituents who were wheelchair users. It's the same for parents with pushchairs and things. And if you're just kind of walking around, you don't necessarily realise that the lamppost in the middle of the pavement is actually really annoying and makes part of the high street not accessible for you if you've got a buggy or if you're in a wheelchair. And there are some campaigns now that we've been supporting to make villages kind of dementia friendly and thinking about those types of needs. Is that new, or did people think about that when they were designing high streets back in the 1916 time that you talked about earlier?
I think sadly it is new. I think that it's really brilliant that we live in a more inclusive time where everybody's access needs are considered. I think when high streets were being built at any time before that, it was probably less considered around accessibility. So anything we can do now that helps us keep the character and also balance everybody's access needs is really important if we're going to see thriving high streets in the future.